Isaiah Brooks only opened the casket 1 inch, but that was enough to freeze an entire chapel. A white envelope slipped onto the satin lining, marked in Harold Whitmore's handwriting. Eleanor, do not let Mason read the will first. The organ stopped. Eleanor stood. Mason Drake went pale and ordered Isaiah to step away. But Isaiah noticed the casket tag had been switched, and his father's old words echoed in his head. Never rush the final ride. Then Eleanor opened the envelope and found one more clue, a silver pocket watch Mason had tried to hide. The wrong casket opened the right secret. Isaiah Brooks stood in the marble chapel of the Whitmore family estate, wearing his black funeral suit and his father's old white gloves, checking the final tag before the service began. The organ hummed softly. White lilies filled the aisle. Millionaires whispered behind dark veils and polished shoes. Mason Drake tapped his folder and told him to hurry. But Isaiah saw the label had been placed over another number. He opened the lid only 1 inch, just enough to confirm the mistake. A white envelope slid into view. Eleanor Whitmore saw Harold's handwriting and rose from the front pew. On the envelope were 10 chilling words. Do not let Mason read the will first. 4 hours earlier, Isaiah was wiping down the black hearse behind Magnolia Rest Funeral Home while dawn turned the Charleston sky pale gray. His suit was old, but pressed clean. His shoes were polished. In his coat pocket rested the white gloves his father had worn for 30 years in the same business. Isaiah checked every strap, every paper, every transport tag, because his father had taught him that the final ride deserved more care than any first impression. People thought funeral driving was quiet work, invisible work. Isaiah never saw it that way. To him, it was a promise. And that morning, one crooked label on a Whitmore casket was already waiting to test it. By mid-morning, Isaiah guided the hearse through the iron gates of the Whitmore estate, where live oaks bent over a private chapel built from pale stone and old money. The driveway curved past fountains, black cars, and flower trucks carrying white lilies worth more than his monthly rent. Guests in tailored coats glanced at him, then through him, as if he were part of the vehicle. Isaiah kept his hands steady on the wheel. Inside the chapel, the floors shined like glass, and every whisper sounded expensive. Only Claire Whitmore stopped near the entrance and met his eyes. Thank you for being careful, she said softly. Isaiah nodded once, not knowing her small kindness would soon make her the first person to believe him. Mason Drake arrived carrying a black leather folder pressed against his chest like it held the future of the Whitmore name. He greeted Eleanor with a low voice, nodded to Claire, then looked at Isaiah without really seeing him. We need this completed on schedule, he said. The will reading begins immediately after the service. Isaiah checked the paperwork again and noticed the first strange detail. The transport number on the chapel list ended in 7, but the tag on the casket ended in 1. He stepped closer to Mason and said, Sir, this label may be wrong. Mason's polite face hardened. No one will know the difference, he whispered. Isaiah felt his father's gloves tighten in his pocket. Isaiah called his supervisor from the side hallway, keeping his voice low while the organist tested the first hymn. His supervisor sounded nervous the moment he heard the Whitmore name. Do not upset them, Isaiah. Just keep the service moving. Isaiah looked back through the chapel doors. Mason was watching him now, one hand resting on the black folder, his smile too still. Then Claire appeared beside Isaiah and asked if something was wrong. He could have said no. He could have protected his job and ignored the crooked tag. Instead, he touched his father's gloves and remembered the old rule. Never rush the final ride. Then he walked back toward the casket. The organ softened as Isaiah reached the front of the chapel. Every pew seemed to watch his back. Mason moved quickly, whispering, This is not your place. Isaiah kept his voice respectful. My place is making sure the right person receives the right honor. Claire stood near Eleanor, tense but silent. Isaiah put on his father's white gloves, checked the crooked tag once more, then lifted the lid only 1 inch, careful not to disturb anything inside. He did not look deeper than he had to. A white envelope slid into view against the satin lining. Eleanor gasped before anyone spoke. The handwriting was Harold's. Mason stepped forward, but Isaiah saw the words first. Do not let Mason read the will first. The chapel turned ice cold before the organist could finish the hymn. Eleanor rose slowly from the front pew, her black-gloved hand pressed against her chest. Harold wrote that, she whispered. Mason forced a laugh, but it landed flat. "This is clearly a private note," he said, reaching for the envelope. Isaiah did not move, but Claire stepped between them. If grandfather wanted it hidden, he would not have written grandmother's name on the front. A murmur moved through the chapel. Mason's polished face tightened. He looked at Isaiah like a man searching for someone to blame. "You had no right to open that," he said. Isaiah answered quietly. "I had every reason to check what someone tried to switch." Eleanor took the envelope with hands that trembled despite all her years of command. The chapel waited as she broke the seal. Inside was one page in Harold's careful handwriting and a small sketch of his silver pocket watch. Eleanor read silently at first, then her face changed. "Mason has hidden the true will," she whispered. "He moved money from the Workers' Foundation and planned to control everything after my service." Gasps traveled through the pews. Mason stepped back, shaking his head too quickly. "That is impossible," he said. But Isaiah noticed Claire staring toward a side table near the vestry, where a velvet box sat half covered by flowers. Inside, something silver caught the light. Claire crossed to the side table before Mason could stop her. The velvet box looked harmless beneath the lilies, but Isaiah remembered Harold's sketch and felt the chapel hold its breath again. Claire opened the lid. Inside lay a silver pocket watch, polished, heavy, and engraved with the Whitmore crest. Mason's voice sharpened. "That belongs with family items. Leave it alone." But Eleanor lifted her chin and said, "Open it." Claire pressed the small latch. The watch sprang open, revealing a tiny brass key tucked behind the clock face and 4 numbers etched along the rim. Isaiah saw Mason's eyes drop to the numbers before anyone read them aloud. He already knew the code, and now everyone knew he knew. The small safe was built into the wall of the vestry behind a framed-him sheet, exactly where Harold's note had drawn it. Eleanor held the brass key, but her hands would not stop shaking, so Claire guided it into the lock. Isaiah stood near the doorway, silent, while Mason kept saying this was inappropriate, unnecessary, disrespectful. No one listened now. The 4 numbers from the watch opened the second lock. Inside was a sealed folder, a flash drive, and a letter marked Final Will. Eleanor removed the folder and read the first page. Harold had revoked Mason's authority 2 weeks before his passing. The room fell silent again, because the man Mason tried to bury had just spoken louder than everyone alive. Mason tried to recover with a calm smile, but his voice came out thin. "Harold was confused near the end," he said. "That document is not valid." Eleanor looked at the page again, then at the flash drive resting in the safe. Claire found a small monitor in the vestry office and connected it with trembling hands. Harold's recorded message appeared on the screen, his voice weak but clear. "Mason Drake has taken from the foundation meant for working families. If this is being played, someone tried to silence my final wishes." The chapel listened from the open doorway. Mason stepped back, but Isaiah quietly blocked the aisle with nothing but his steady presence. This time, no one looked through him. Eleanor stepped back into the chapel holding Harold's final will as if it weighed more than the marble walls around her. Her voice did not shake when she read it aloud. The Workers' Foundation would be restored in full. Mason Drake would be removed from every Whitmore trust, every board seat, every account. A new scholarship would be created for families whose labor had been ignored but never forgotten. The guests who had whispered about Isaiah now stood silent, because the man in the service uniform had protected the truth better than anyone in a tailored suit. Mason lowered his eyes as Claire called the family attorney and requested an immediate review. Isaiah looked down at his father's white gloves, and for the first time that morning, his hands stopped trembling. After the service, the guests left in silence, and the chapel bells sounded softer than before. Isaiah stood beside the black hearse, folding his father's white gloves with careful hands, ready to disappear back into the work no one used to notice. Then Eleanor Whitmore approached with Claire at her side. She did not speak like a billionaire now. She spoke like a grateful widow. "Harold left one more envelope," she said, "and this one has your name on it." Isaiah stared at the handwriting. Inside was an old photograph of his father standing beside Harold Whitmore, both men young and smiling. On the back, Harold had written, "Your father once saved my life. Today his son saved my name."